Hello, everyone. This is Ed Breniger, and welcome to the Eddy Network podcast. My guest today is my longtime friend, Tom Morris, who we've known each other for over 50 years, which is remarkable that we're still connected together. And greatly appreciative of him and the work that he's done and the influence that he's had upon me and my work and my life. So thank you, Tom. And so who are you and why am I talking to you today?
Well, I don't know, man. We've known each other for 50 years. At least one of us still has hair. We don't look too much the worse
That's
for
right.
wear. But I don't know if you knew this about me in college when we met, but my mother told me I'd never be able to go to college. She said there was no money. I should figure out what kind of job I wanted after high school. I grew up in a house about the size of the room I'm sitting in now. It was an 800 square foot house, a rented house on a dirt street that got paved while I was growing up. And it just didn't look like there were any prospects for me to do anything other than the blue collar work that so many of my relatives did, and the people who lived on our street. They all worked at an American Tobacco Company, Liggett and Myers, worked in factories, and that was kind of what was looming ahead for me. And then I got an unexpected letter. I'd been nominated for a scholarship. I had to call around and find out what it was. It ended up being a really good thing because it was a free ride to Chapel Hill, to UNC Chapel Hill, where we met, all expenses paid, to the extent that when I graduated, I had money left over from this doggone scholarship. And being on that scholarship, I'm pretty certain to this day, blew open the doors for graduate school and let me get into Yale, the top program in the country in religious studies. And then I got involved in philosophy too. So did my double PhD in philosophy and religious studies, went to teach at Notre Dame, and I was there for 15 years. And having the time of my life, I was able to pioneer two new fields within my discipline, things that hadn't been touched for hundreds of years. And now I retired from teaching 27 years ago, and I just found out recently that the two fields I pioneered are hugely flourishing fields now. A lot of young philosophers working hard in these fields, pumping out books with the top presses, and I'm a proud papa of all that. So people were shocked when 27 years ago I just walked away from it all with a new sense of calling that I was supposed to bring philosophy and the wisdom of the ages into people's lives where they live now. Yeah. And so since then, I've been traveling the country and traveling the world, giving talks, writing books, and trying to make a difference for good for people. And the feedback when people are exposed to ideas, as you know, the feedback is extraordinary. When we get beyond the superficial, when we get beyond the sloganistic, when we help people really think about things that matter, they glow, they come alive to it, and they don't even need us anymore. They're off and running, right? And so, yeah, absolutely. That's why we do what we do. So here we are still doing it.
Isn't that amazing? And having fun doing it too.
Having fun.
Yeah. So one of the things I wanted us to talk about today is this book that you wrote called The Everyday Patriot. And because to me, it signals that everybody, this comes out of my own model, everybody can take personal initiative to be a leader of impact.
Yeah.
And I saw that you're mirroring that idea in this book, and so I want to hear what your thoughts are about being an everyday patriot and what that means, and if you've and in particular, if you've never thought of yourself in this way, how do you begin to reimagine how you conduct yourself as a person who now is becoming a contributor to your local community?
Yeah, that's a great question. Rethinking and reimagining are so important at so many stages of life. In fact, almost continuously through life. And this is a project I never planned to do, right? I mean, at Notre Dame, I taught philosophy of religion. I never planned to be a business philosopher, which is what I've been sort of for 27 years, talking to every kind of major corporation across almost every industry imaginable, taking my topics for research and writing from what their problems were, from what their questions were. So I've just been a guy who's said yes a lot. When people say, hey, look, we're having a difficult change, we're being bought by a bigger company, We don't know if we're going to have a job next week. Could you give us a talk about how to deal with difficult change? Okay, sure. I'll put something together. And then that led to my book, Plato's Lemonade Stand. So I've always responded to people. Well, one day I got a call from an old friend. I haven't known him as long as I've known you, but I've known him for 30 years. And he said, "Hey, Tom, I just bought a copy of the Declaration of Independence for $8 million. And I said, "What?" I said, "You overpaid, man. I got mine for $4.95 at Barnes and Noble." And he said, "Yeah, you're real funny." He said, there was a yard sale in Philadelphia. A guy bought a bad painting in a nice frame because he wanted to reframe something he had at home, paid $4, got home, starts taking it apart, hidden away in the back was one of the original copies of the Declaration of Independence printed on July 4th, 1776.
Wow.
Dunlap broadside, it's called. There were 200 copies printed to be taken through the colonies and read in public places as soon as possible so people would know what was going on, right? And so this guy says, "I bought it not to hang it on the wall of my house. I bought it to send it around America on a road trip so that people who don't live in big cities with great museums that maybe have one of the other 20 some copies that were known to still exist, they could see the nation's birth certificate and see that preamble and see those ideals that launched our collective enterprise. I want you to think about traveling with the Declaration," he said, and giving a speech at every whistle stop on citizenship and on patriotism. And I said, "Oh, man, that sounds great. Well, let me get to work on it. Let me reread the Declaration as an adult because I haven't read it in many years since I was in school. And let me start working." So weeks passed, 2 or 3 weeks passed. I'm writing out a speech. And he calls me back. He says, "Well, I got kind of some bad news." He says, I had to turn the Declaration Project over to a big team, and word got out in Hollywood. This was the TV producer, Norman Lear, who's responsible for so many of our classic American sitcoms. He said, "The word got out, and now every Oscar winner wants to travel with the Declaration." And my team said, "Okay, who's going to draw the crowd? Your friend, the philosopher in Wilmington, North Carolina, or, Denzel or whoever."
Yeah.
And so he said, "You're probably going to get to stay at home after all." And I said, "Well, let's do this. Let me write it up as a little book and
Yeah.
you can sell it in connection with the trip." He said, "That's a great idea." This was 2001, 2002. And we only did a limited printing. It was a big hit with people. It was a topic I never thought I'd write about. But then time passes. A guy in 2002 bought 3,000 copies of that little book and gave it to his teachers. He was a school superintendent. And so a year ago, I didn't know this guy, but a year ago we had breakfast together. And he said, "That little book you wrote in 2001, 2002, you need to rewrite it for our time, for the challenges we face now." I said, "Really? I hadn't thought about that. Let me go look at it and I'll see." He was right. And so I spent 4 months all day, every day, rewriting the book, which has become The Everyday Patriot, How to Be a Great American Now. And it's this joyful enterprise that I never thought I'd be right. I wasn't trained in social and political philosophy. Well, I wasn't trained in business philosophy, but you know how it is, Ed.
Dude.
Once you've cultivated the life of the mind, you can pursue ideas in any domain of life in a productive way.
Yeah, the way I describe that is everything I was trained to do, I wasn't very good at. Everything I learned to do, I do well.
Yeah, there you go.
It's kind of the way it is, and anybody can make that change. Anyone can decide on a dime, turn on a dime, and decide, "I'm going to make a difference in the world. I'm going to make a difference in my neighborhood."
You're absolutely right. And that's what I'm talking about in the book. It's funny how there's this misunderstanding of patriotism in our time, where there are all these famous quotes about, patriotism is the last refuge of the scoundrel and all that sort of thing. I wanted to look into the word patriotism, do a little etymology, which I like to do because I think word meanings and word histories often capture collective wisdom across the centuries. So I go back and look at patriotism. It just means love of your land, love of your native land, your homeland. And so I look into various variations of the word through history, and then I began to ponder citizenship as well as patriotism, because I came to realize we need to reclaim the concept of patriotism for our time. Because when the book came out, I looked it up on Amazon one day, and two or three different things came up. The book that came up before mine on patriotism had a guy with rifles and pistols all over his body. And it was about how the patriot should arm himself to patrol his neighborhood these days. I thought, whoa, I'm talking about a different kind of patriotism here. So
Yeah.
I came really quickly to realize that citizenship isn't just a legal status, it's a moral status. And that patriotism is not an us against them mentality. It's not xenophobic or jingoistic or adversarial at its heart. It's about growing your garden, cultivating your garden well, starting where you are and trying to improve the world. There's a book I bought 30 years ago called Perfecting a Piece of the World.
Hmm.
That title has stuck with me. And I thought to myself, it's really interesting. There's a model of human life that a Stoic philosopher in the second century Rome came up with, a guy that almost nobody's heard of called Heracles, because most of his works disappeared through the centuries, but a couple of his ideas remain. And one idea is this: he said, each of us can map our lives with concentric circles, like an archery target, with the bullseye in the middle and the big bands around it. He said, imagine the innermost circle is your own heart and mind. Imagine the next circle out as your household, your family, your closest friends. The next circle out might be your neighborhood or your workplace or both. The next circle out might be your town, your city. Maybe the next one out is your state, your region, your country, and finally, the world. There are all these concentric circles. And Heracles had this idea: the way to get started in making your positive difference in the world is to work in that innermost circle of your own heart and mind and get that in as good a shape as you can, so that you can contribute in a positive way to the next circle out, your family, your friends, your neighborhood, and make your family and friends, make all that as strong as it can be. Those friendships, those family relations, that neighborhood, help that neighborhood be clean and safe and great and beautiful to contribute to the city. And your city then contributes to the state, and so forth and so on. And then he said, as you participate in the outer circles, always remember, outer circles need to reach back and support the innermost circles. So the innermost circles contribute to the outer circles. The outer circles reach back and support the inner circles. There's this beautifully healthy dynamic where it's not a matter of anybody fighting anybody. Good gardeners don't fight each other. One guy likes tomatoes, one likes potatoes. They grow their own crops and share with each other, right?
That's right.
So this whole idea of the book was contributive care in a local way that expands from the locality onward. You can't start with the state, you can't start with the nation, and too much of our national politics in America and around the world is just on the national level. It's a spectator sport on the national level, and people yell about things they can't do anything about, and so they yell even louder. Whereas the proper view of patriotism and citizenship, you start where you can make a difference, you contribute in a careful, caring way, and then the nation ends up being affected by what you've done in your neighborhood, in your town, in your state. We've gotten it all backwards in the world right now, and that's okay. That gives us something in our time to do, right? To turn all this stuff around.
Yeah, you don't have to wait. There's no, and
Right.
whatever you are and whatever you know and whatever you can do is what you can do right now.
Right. Start now. You don't have to say, well, I'd have to run for office and that would take a year and I'd have to get campaign fund. No.
No,
There are
no,
things you can do right now.
that's
Volunteer things you can do, building things that you can do right today.
yeah. This reminds me of a comment my publisher in Nairobi, Kenya, shared with me as we were putting the final stages of the rewrite of Circle of Impact,
Yeah.
Africa, and she said, I think what they need to hear is that you have everything that you need.
Yeah.
And that just hit me like, wow, that's really true. So that's now the title of the book. You have everything you need.
Oh, that's awesome. That's great to hear. It's such a powerful concept, right? Because there is this fear reaction in our deepest brain structures that makes us hyper aware of the things we don't have that we might need.
That's
And
right.
so we're focused on that. We're worried about that. We're complaining about that. We're striving for that rather than using the things we have. And we may have all we need to start the most magnificent process if we can just be happy in working in those small ways, in those small levels that can add up in almost unimaginable ways.
You know what you're describing reminds me of the essay that Edward Shills wrote back in the early '60s called "Center and Periphery." You know,
Mm,
he was talking about the center being the where the elite of society also are the representation, the representatives and the holders in trust of the values of society, and the periphery is like these outer circles that you describe.
right.
And what you know I see is that what happens is that if you become passive in allowing the
Mhm.
center to just do its thing, then they will wander off and do something else because they're human beings, and
Yeah.
that's kind of what we're where we are. They're all kind of focused on other things, and we haven't really given them the accountability that is warranted by their authority. So we really need
Right.
to be doing our own thing, which presents a not a challenge, but a a sort of a counterweight to what
Yeah.
they should be doing. And
We're
that
talking about recentering the center, right? Because in
right,
every
right,
state, the state capital thinks they're the center, right? Raleigh in North Carolina, where I live, and Washington thinks it's the center of the nation. Well, wait a minute. Maybe each of us is the center of the state. Each of us is the center of the nation. And as we build out, we will put them in proper perspective, and eventually they will put themselves in proper perspective. Not because the ego-driven guys who are there right now are going to suddenly have a change of heart, but because more of us are going to move into those positions with the right kind of attitude. So it's not about us. It's not about our power. It's about being servants at every circle along the way.
absolutely. So as you did your study of the Declaration of Independence, and everybody who has studied that has their own take on it,
Sure.
but what were some of the values that you identified there that just kind of leapt out at you saying, "Oh, this is really great. This is what I need to talk about." What are some of those values
Well,
that?
I mean, you can't get many sentences into it before you're just, oh my goodness, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness alone, right? I mean, pursuit of happiness. I mean, here guys under the threat of treason and execution. They're talking about happiness. They've
Yeah,
got time for that, right? And so you say it makes you look into what happiness is. What was the philosophical inheritance they had where they thought that needed to be up front because they were mirroring John Locke, life, liberty, and property, but they replaced property with the pursuit of happiness. And it's like, okay, it's like they were digging deep with Aristotle that happiness is not just a feeling of giddiness or delight or, oh, this is great, a big smiley face, but happiness is a fullness of fulfillment and participation and contentment and making your difference to the world. Everybody ought to be free to pursue that. And a friend pointed out to me that in the 18th century, a pursuit wasn't just a seeking of what you didn't have, but pursuit could be used with respect to a practice of what you do have. So the pursuit of happiness need not be picturing happiness as this remote thing that we're all running to try to find, but the pursuit of happiness in 18th century usage was the practice of happiness. We need to be free to do that. And so I was sort of stimulated to look back, okay, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So they put life first. Life has always been in the center of American values. We should value each and every life. And so slavery, in a sense, they weren't living inconsistently with their own purported values. In fact, I've done a lot of book clubs virtually on the book, The Everyday Patriot. And all the book clubs have been all over the world. Book clubs have one young reader from Romania. He's 19 years old in Romania. He said, "Your book has made me want to be a better Romanian." So it translates across national borders. But in one book group, and everybody was so positive about the book, one guy said, "Well, I got some problems." And I said, "Good. Well, good. Tell me what your problems are." "Well, you attribute to the founders of America all these great values, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, equality, justice. Through the book, you talk about a lot of values that you say they had. But listen, these were guys who stole the land from the native inhabitants. These were guys who had owned slaves and weren't letting them go. These are guys who had no respect for women whatsoever. So they didn't live these values at all. They didn't have these values at all. So why should we be concerned to live values they had? Why should we look back to them? Because they didn't even have these values. And I said, wait, but what was the last thing you said? They had no respect for women. Yeah, no respect for women at all. I said, I don't know if you've ever read Abigail Adams' letters to her husband, John, when he was in Philadelphia about to give up on American independence and come home. And she kept him there. She quoted Shakespeare from the play Julius Caesar. She quoted everybody. She made argument. He listened to her because he respected her. And do you think she was the only spouse of any of those guys in Philadelphia who was well read at the time? Because think of the class these people came from, the planter class, the upper mercantile class, the governing classes. You think they had no respect for women? I think we've descended from where a lot of them are. And I said, but let me just address your other question, that the founders didn't have these values of justice and equality after all. I said, and Ed, I'm making this up as I go because that's what philosophers do, right? Somebody asks you a tough question, right. You got to come up with an answer. So I just made up something.
Improv.
Yes, right. It's philosophical improv. Right? Yeah. If you can have some jokes, so much the better. But this is what Plato and Aristotle did. I used to say to my students, I wish I could have a banner behind me every time I give a class. I could be wrong in gigantic letters because I'm making it all up. Now, I'm hoping it's true, but it was up to you to decide. So I said to the guy, there are two models for what it is to have a value. Let's call the first model the absolutist model, in accordance with which, unless you live a value perfectly in complete consistency in everything you do, that's not your value. I said, if that's your model of what it is to have a value, good luck finding justice in the world. Good luck finding a good man. Yeah. Good luck finding any positive value exemplified. It's treating ethical values like geometers treat ideas like the perfect square, the perfect sphere, the perfectly straight line. It has some use in geometry to use these as ideal things, absolute things. But in morality, if that was your standard for applying a moral concept, you're not going to find any in the world. I said, but that's okay, because there's a second model for what it is to have a value. I call it the aspirational model. Yeah. Where to have a value is to truly have a lighthouse, a beacon to light your way, and you're hoping to live in accordance with it, and you're trying your best, and you're falling short, and sometimes you're falling way short. And sometimes, like the founders who continued to have slaves, didn't set free everybody right away, you're knowing that you got to get all the colonies to do this or it's not going to work at all. And so there's some of the colonies where they're so entrenched with slavery, we got to be patient with those folks. We got to take our time on this one. And so it's not that they didn't have the value. It's that they had it aspirationally and they lived it to the best they could, given the constraints they were under. And we've inherited that. So let's try to do that ourselves.
Now, I think that's not just a great thing for politics. It's a great thing for how we live our lives, so that, I know a lot of people who are very negative about themselves because they cannot reach the level of perfection that their values dictate. And I think, well, you're never going to get there. So why are you worrying about it?
Yeah. And like you said earlier about the African title of your book, those are people who worry more about what they don't have than what they do have, because if they do have these values as guides, they're going to trip up, they're going to fall, they're going to stumble. We all do, but at least they have the right values as guides. So they should feel good about what they do have and that they can do something with it. Perfectly? Give me an example of anybody doing it perfectly. No, that's not something to judge yourself against. It's an artificial standard. So get going in your imperfect, stumbling way, but just stumble in the right direction.
And it makes me wonder whether this idea of perfection is actually an obstacle to actually having good interaction at the political level and at the community level, because we can no longer allow people to be human. As a result.
You're right. In fact, ironically, the idea of perfection may be the most imperfect idea of all, precisely because of that. People, suppose there's a problem in society. Suppose it's a problem with the environment, or suppose it's a problem with gun violence, or suppose it's a problem with political corruption, and somebody offers a solution that will make a positive difference. Everybody else says no, because that solution alone won't solve the whole problem. So why are you even worried about it? Well, because they want a perfect solution. They want a complete solution. Why not? Let's patch together a lot of imperfect, incomplete solutions that reduces the problem more and more and more, so that it becomes more manageable, rather than being this ultimate challenge to everybody. We've got to learn the beauty of incrementalism in solving problems one step at a time.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, and be kind to yourself,
Yeah.
in that sense of step by step. And because what I realize is that the people who are calling for an expectation of perfection, it's really a way of deflecting attention from them and accountability for them and their own performance. And there's a lot of that goes on. So
Yeah.
so you've been having book clubs about this. You've written the book. And it's getting a wide readership, I guess, right?
Yeah. I mean, every author wants a wider readership than he or she has.
Please buy two.
Yeah, that's right. Give it to all your friends, But yeah, it's having a very positive effect. We did a kind of a staged rollout, a little bit at a time, to spark word of mouth. And it's building toward this 4th of July. It was released last 4th of July on a limited basis in honor of Norman Lear's birthday. On July 31st, he turned 100 years old. And, as probably a lot of people call him the greatest American television creator. And I talked to him a few months ago. He called here one night. We were watching the ABC television special called 100 Years of Norman Lear. We were watching it in our bedroom, and the phone rings, and it's Norman Lear calling. And so
ironic.
He was like he was 50 years old or 40 years old. He was lively and active, and he's got new TV shows coming out. He's 100 years old. So, all right, look, we're getting a little long in the tooth. We're getting a little older here, but
maybe you are.
Well, yeah, maybe it's me. But I think we still have a lot of time, a lot of runway ahead of us to take off with some of these ideas. So it's very heartening. It's very inspiring to know people like that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I interviewed a guy a few weeks ago named Trevor Baldock, who has been doing leadership work all over the world, and particularly in Africa. And he's written a book called Being Mandela. And the focus of it is really about eldership. And so he's now working on a project on eldership.
Good.
So let's talk a little generational stuff then.
Yeah.
Because I think that's really relevant to what we're going through. So you have Gen Zs and and millennials and Gen Xers, and then we have us boomers, and there are not too many of our parents' generation left, but
right.
And so each of us has a different way of approaching this being the everyday patriot. And so let's talk a little bit about, let's start at our age and then go down to the Gen Zers and how they can apply this idea.
Yeah, it's interesting to me because I actually had to pull a few pages out of this book to keep it short, and I'm going to use them in another book. I liked the ideas I pulled out at the last minute, but too many people said to me, "You got to keep it short. You got to keep the book short." Those pages would fit great in another book, and I said, "Okay, you're right." But actually, it was about 4 stages of life. The first 25 years, roughly, the second 25 years, the third 25 years, and ideally 100 up to 100 and beyond the next 25 years. And the idea was that there were 4 main things that we should all focus on at each stage. But at each and every one of those stages, one of those would kind of emerge as the lead value. And the idea was the first 25 years, the main thing is we're learning. We're just learning about ourselves and the world and history and geography and skills and sports. And we're just learning all the time, right? The first 25 years. And the next 25 years, the main thing is that we're building a family, we're building a career, we're building a business. And then the third 25 years, 50 to 75, We've done most of the building, most of us, and we're serving through what we've built, through what we've learned, and through what we've built. We're serving others. And then the ideal was the next 25 years, the fourth quarter, as people say, we're guiding with the wisdom we've accumulated through all the other stages. Now, the point I made in those pages I've pulled out and I'm saving for later is that when you do any of these stages right, you're doing all four things. Like my students at Notre Dame, they were in the first segment, the first stage. So they were mainly learning, but they were also building and serving and guiding. They served in the community in all kinds of ways. Notre Dame was famous for community service, for the kids get involved in volunteer organizations, that sort of thing. They were building their networks of friendship like you and me. And look at us 50 years later, we're still talking. They were also guiding the younger students, when the juniors and seniors would give advice to the incoming freshmen. So at every stage, you should be doing all four of those things, right? Learning, building, serving, and guiding. One of them will crop up as kind of the main thing in that stage, but you should be doing all to do that one well, or to do any of them well. And so those of us who are in our phase now, like I'm getting ready to turn 71 next week. I'm not at the 75 period yet, but these are kind of loose designations. I'm ready to give some guidance and advice to those who are on different segments of the road. I'm a little farther down than people. I want to serve them. I want to guide them. I've done a lot of building in my life. I'm still doing some of that, building ways to serve, ways to guide. But I want to help the younger people realize that as they learn, they can be building volunteer organizations. They can be serving their communities in their world in surprising ways if they will just have what Aristotle thought to be the number one virtue of all the virtues, the virtue of courage, without which he thought you won't use any of the other virtues under pressure, like honesty and generosity. If they will just have the courage to reach out and serve, to reach out and build, to reach out and guide, and not just have their heads caught in just the learning. School, nothing but school. That's a problem for a lot of kids. They think, well, I don't have time to do all this other stuff. Well, you know what? When you start doing the other stuff, you do your core thing better. And they're all enhancing, right? It's almost like the farmers who learn not to just grow one crop on a piece of land. They got to rotate different crops to keep the soil healthy, right? You got to rotate in your life different things going on at any given stage to keep healthy and to make your biggest difference. So I think those of us at our stage, we should be working hard to encourage the younger people to, you guys don't have to wait your turn. It's already your turn. You're on the field, you're in the game, run a play. And when that starts happening, we just love what we see, right?
Yeah, I like relating to all these different age groups, and with that younger group, when I meet with them, I talk with them. Okay, yeah, I've had a lot of experience. I know a lot of stuff, and I'm glad to share it. But you have too. You've learned things already, and so we're going to mutually mentor each other, because that's great. Real communities are going to function. And then with people in their 40s, I found that a lot of the people that I end up working with are in their 40s, and they're going through a career transition. They've been in their career for 20, 25 years. I mean, it's like you and I, we changed our careers at the same time. And I mean, you went and became a philosopher to business, and I started a consulting practice at the same time. And and we were in our 40s, and a lot of people go through that.
That's right.
And then when they hit their 60s and they're thinking it's time to retire, well, it's now time to recalibrate and reorient and go to do something new. So I'm planning on working till I'm 100. Family genetics would dictate that. I'm going to make it to 100. And
that's good.
So I've got a plan. I've got 30 more years of, So I turned 70 in June. So we're right.
Okay, that's good.
That same point. And I see this as, okay, this is my third career that I'm getting ready to.
No, I love that. And I'm glad that we have a greater longevity now, because I think I've only had common sense for about 10 or 15 years. So it's good now to be able to have many years to put it to use.
Mine is about 20 minutes. So, well,
Yeah.
this is really great. You know, we could certainly talk forever and about things, and you know, what's remarkable to me is that the consistency of both of our lives over the 50 years that we've known each other, 50 plus years that we've known each other, is pretty remarkable. And I'm grateful for that, and thank you for who you are and what you've contributed to the world. And even more so, I hope it gets better. I hope you expand your reach. And
Yeah.
I know you've got new projects, and
Oh,
I hope they're very fulfilling for you, and
thanks.
lead to some new things that maybe will surprise you. And
Hey,
so
I love those the surprises. You know, I guess the Everyday Patriot was either my 30th book or my 31st book, and the next one is being shopped around by an agent already, shown to publishers, and the one after that is already written. But we've talked earlier about the fact that I'm writing a book I never expected to write, and I have another one prepared for after that. So basically, I'm a person who can't shut up. So it's a good thing I've lived this long. So at least I get all those ideas out there for other
yeah,
people.
well, it's a benefit to all of us, and thank you for that. So, if people want to find you, how do they find you?
Oh, yeah, my website, Tomv, as in Victor, tomvmorris.com, Morris. Go to tomvmorris.com on the About page. People can click on the various social media icons, follow me on social media. I try every morning to post a small thought. It could be a sentence, it could be a paragraph, it could be 2 paragraphs. And I try to find a beautiful picture to illustrate the thought. Well, often it goes the other way around. I collect galleries of beautiful pictures, and I'll be looking through these pictures, and one will spark a thought. And that's the thought I typed that morning, and I post on social media that people will react to for the rest of the day, and often for 2 or 3 days after that.
Yeah,
I gain all these beautiful perspectives from other people because I've sort of put something out there for them to spark off, and it leads to this joint wisdom, insight arising around the world from different cultures, from all sorts of people. It's a wonderful thing to do. So if folks want to follow me on social media, we get to keep philosophizing.
that's a great thing. So we'll certainly put that in the show notes, and so they can find you and follow you. And yeah, I do appreciate those little snippets that you put every day. I like it. They're great. So
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. I never
I,
know. I never know if I'm going to come up with something or not. But so far, I've had a streak that's going on for years.
well, you can always go ask Mary. What do I need to say, Mary?
Yeah, that's right. She'll come up with something
And
good.
she'll have a word of wisdom for you. So, well, thank you, Tom, for coming on. This has been fun. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Please make sure you subscribe, hit the like button, but even more so, offer your comments or your questions so that we can have interaction with you and be in conversation with you. And thank you, Tom. We'll see you again soon. We'll do this again after the big book that you got to finish by the end of the year. We'll do another one of these at that time.
Sounds
So,
great.
thank you, everyone, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.